Did you know there's a place where meat can stay fresh for 2 years without a single watt of electricity? While we're all one power outage away from a refrigerator disaster, the Inuit have turned the Arctic's brutal cold into nature's perfect freezer. And that's just the beginning of their food preservation genius. Let me show you what I mean. Ever tried keeping your groceries fresh when the power goes out? Now imagine doing that year-round. That's the daily reality for Inuit communities. These Arctic masters of preservation handle more meat in a year than most of us see in a lifetime. 1,500 pounds per family annually without a single refrigerator. My freezer once died and I panicked over a few frozen pizzas. Meanwhile, Inuit families are expertly preserving everything from seal to whale and caribou. At temperatures dropping to negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit, they've turned the harsh Arctic into the world's biggest freezer. But their first trick involves something we usually save for snowmen. And not just any snowman-style snow will do. Remember those snow forts you built as a kid? The Inuit took that concept and turned it into the world's most efficient meat locker. Snow caves aren't just convenient holes in the ground, they're carefully engineered storage spaces that would make any modern architect jealous. The trick lies in the snow's natural insulating properties. At certain depths, these caves maintain a steady temperature that's actually warmer than the bitter negative 84 degrees Fahrenheit outside, but still cold enough to keep meat frozen solid. The real magic happens in the construction. Inuit families dig these caves strategically on hillsides where snow accumulates but doesn't completely bury the entrance. It's like having a walk-in freezer, except Mother Nature pays the electricity bill. The caverns can stretch up to 20 feet deep. That's longer than 3 tall people lying head to toe. Here's a fun fact that blew my mind. The snow actually creates tiny air pockets that act like nature's bubble wrap, providing insulation that rivals modern freezer technology. Last week, my fancy refrigerator broke down and defrosted everything inside. Meanwhile, these snow caves have been keeping meat fresh for thousands of years without a single power outage or repair call. The ice banks work similarly, but with an extra twist. Huge blocks of ice are stacked like nature's Tetris game, creating gaps and channels that keep the air flowing just right. When spring arrives and temperatures rise to a balmy 20 degrees Fahrenheit, practically t-shirt weather up there, these ice structures stay frozen solid. The meat inside remains so well preserved that even my grandmother, who used to preserve everything in sight, would have been impressed. You might think all this snow and ice would make the meat taste watery, but that's where you'd be wrong. The dry Arctic air actually helps create a protective layer around the meat, kind of like nature's vacuum sealing. While snow caves are impressive, the real VIP of Arctic food storage is right under our feet. Permafrost. That's the layer of earth that stays frozen harder than my aunt's Christmas fruitcake all year round. We're talking about ground that hasn't thawed since woolly mammoths were complaining about the cold. At depths between 10 to 20 feet, permafrost maintains a steady temperature of around 31 degrees Fahrenheit, making it nature's most reliable deep freeze. The Inuit didn't need fancy geology degrees to figure out this was prime real estate for meat storage. They've dug countless storage chambers into this frozen ground, some dating back generations. Each family knows exactly where their spot is. It's like having an underground parking spot, except instead of cars, you're storing seals. The amazing part? These permafrost chambers never need maintenance. No defrosting cycles, no ice buildup, no cleaning required. The only rule is, don't forget where you dug your hole, or you'll be playing the world's coldest game of hide and seek. The science behind it is pretty cool. Permafrost creates what scientists call a temperature gradient. In normal human speech, that means it gets colder the deeper you go until it hits that sweet spot where everything stays perfectly preserved. Some Inuit communities have found mammoth meat in these natural freezers that's been there for thousands of years. Talk about expired groceries. One elder told researchers that his great-grandfather's storage chamber is still in use today. The same spot has kept meat fresh for over 150 years, longer than most modern appliance companies have existed. Even better, these natural freezers are completely eco-friendly. No electricity, no freon, no carbon footprint. Just dig a hole and let Mother Nature do her thing. But sometimes, when you need a bit more control over your meat storage environment, that's where ice cellars come into play. They're like the custom-built condos of the Arctic storage world. Unlike permafrost chambers that have been around since the Ice Age, These are carefully planned and constructed spaces that combine ancient wisdom with good old-fashioned engineering. Dig about 20 feet down. That's roughly the height of 2 giraffes standing on top of each other, if giraffes ever visited the Arctic, and you'll find yourself in what looks like an underground ice palace. The walls are typically reinforced with whale bones. Talk about recycling. These massive bones, some weighing up to 100 pounds each, work better than any modern building material. They're naturally curved, incredibly strong, and won't rot or rust. Plus, they're basically free if you've just finished processing a whale. The really clever part is the ventilation system. Each cellar has 2 openings, one for entering and one for airflow. The Inuit discovered that proper air circulation prevents that weird freezer smell we all know from our kitchen appliances. You know, that smell that makes you question if that frozen pizza from last year is still good? Yeah, none of that here. The natural airflow keeps everything fresh and prevents ice buildup, which is pretty important when your storage room is made of, well, ice. Temperature control in these cellars is remarkably precise. They maintain a steady 32 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, varying by only a degree or two. That's more stable than my old refrigerator that used to freeze my lettuce one day and turn my ice cream into soup the next. The insulation is so effective that during the rare times when outside temperatures rise above freezing, the cellars stay perfectly cold. It's like having air conditioning powered by physics instead of electricity. The largest ice cellars can hold up to 8,000 pounds of meat, enough to feed a small village through the long Arctic winter. Some families have been using the same cellar for 5 generations. That's longer than most modern marriages last. They pass down the exact location and maintenance techniques like family heirlooms. Here, son, have my ice cellar. Just remember to check the air vents twice a month and don't store the seal meat next to the whale blubber. But sometimes, even the best ice cellar needs a backup plan, and that's where seal oil enters the picture. Seal oil isn't just a condiment, it's practically a superpower when it comes to keeping meat fresh. The Inuit discovered centuries ago that submerging meat in seal oil creates a natural barrier that bacteria can't penetrate. It's like giving your meat a protective force field, except this force field happens to taste delicious. The process starts with rendering fresh seal blubber, which is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. My first attempt at making seal oil would have made any Inuit elder laugh their parka off. Properly rendered seal oil should be crystal clear, not the murky mess I created that looked more like a science experiment gone wrong. The Inuit have perfected this technique over thousands of years, producing oil so pure you could practically read a newspaper through it, if newspapers ever made it that far north. Here's a mind-blowing fact. Seal oil doesn't freeze until it hits negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than most freezers can manage. And when meat is submerged in this liquid gold, it can stay preserved for up to 2 years. The oil doesn't just prevent freezer burn, it actually enhances the meat's flavor over time. It's like aging fine wine, except this wine could survive an apocalypse. The real genius lies in the portability. Unlike those massive ice cellars, seal oil preservation lets you take your meat on the road. Traditional hunters would pack strips of meat in seal oil inside watertight containers made from seal skin. Talk about using every part of the animal. These portable preservation packets meant you could have fresh meat even during long hunting trips. My grandmother used to pack sandwiches in plastic wrap. The Inuit packed whale meat in seal oil. Same concept, slightly different execution. One community elder shared that his family's seal oil recipe has been passed down for 7 generations. The secret? The temperature at which they render the oil must be just right. Too hot and it gets bitter, too cool and it won't preserve properly. It's like making candy where every degree matters, except this candy keeps your winter food supply from spoiling. But what happens when you run out of seal oil or want a different preservation method? That's when the Arctic Wind and Sun Tag team comes into play. The Arctic may not exactly be known for its sunny beaches, but when it comes to drying meat, the combination of frigid winds and bright sunlight works better than any fancy food dehydrator money can buy. Who needs a $200 kitchen appliance when you've got free Arctic air that moves faster than my mother-in-law spreading gossip? The science behind this method is actually pretty fascinating. Arctic winds are incredibly dry. They contain less moisture than the Sahara Desert during a drought. When these winds hit minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, they become nature's most efficient dehydrator. The meat loses moisture so fast it doesn't have time to spoil. It's like speed dating for food preservation, except this relationship lasts way longer. The Inuit have special drying racks called panirtut that they set up in precise locations to catch both the wind and sun. These spots are chosen with more care than most people put into picking their wedding venue. They look for areas where the wind funnels naturally between hills or ice formations, creating what scientists now call microclimate zones. My attempts at finding the perfect spot in my backyard for a garden don't even come close to this level of environmental analysis. The most mind-blowing part? The meat can lose up to 80% of its moisture weight in just 48 hours. That's like going from a juicy steak to beef jerky faster than it takes most people to decide what to watch on Netflix. The Inuit can dry hundreds of pounds of meat simultaneously on these racks. Larger communities often have drying stations that can handle up to 1,000 pounds of meat at once. That's about the weight of a small car in meat form. The sun plays a crucial role too, though not in the way you might expect. The constant daylight during Arctic summers, up to 24 hours in some regions, combined with the reflective properties of snow and ice, creates a unique form of preservation. The UV rays help kill surface bacteria, while the cold air prevents new bacteria from growing. It's like having a natural sanitizer and freezer working together in perfect harmony. Temperature control is crucial. Too warm and the meat spoils. Too cold and it freezes instead of drying. The sweet spot is between 20 degrees Fahrenheit and 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The Inuit can tell if the temperature is right just by the sound the meat makes when they tap it. After decades of experience, they've developed what amounts to a doctoral degree in meat acoustics. I can barely tell if my toast is done without burning it, and these folks are out here conducting symphony orchestras with drying meat. The final product can last up to 5 years if stored properly. That's longer than most relationships on reality TV. The dried meat, called nipku in some regions, becomes so densely packed with nutrients that a single pound contains the same calories as 5 pounds of fresh meat. Talk about efficient packing. Airlines could learn something about compression from this technique, but sometimes the wind and sun need a little help from their smoky friend. And when it comes to preservation, smoke signals success. The Inuit smoking technique isn't just about making meat taste good, though it definitely does that too. It's about turning regular old meat into something that could survive longer than my grandfather's stories about walking uphill both ways to school. Smoking meat in the Arctic comes with its own special challenges. For starters, trees aren't exactly growing on every corner. The Inuit had to get creative with their fuel sources. They use a mixture of dried seaweed, whale oil, and any driftwood they can find. Each community has their own special smoking recipe. Kind of like how every barbecue enthusiast swears their wood chip blend is the secret to perfect ribs, except these recipes have been perfected over thousands of years. The smoking process itself is a masterclass in patience and precision. The meat hangs in specially designed smokehouses, though house might be too fancy a word for what's essentially a sophisticated tent made from seal or caribou hides. These structures are built to trap smoke while letting just enough air flow through to maintain the perfect temperature. Too much ventilation and you're just making cold cuts. Too little and you're making charcoal. Here's a fun fact that would make any food scientist jealous. The combination of cold smoke kept between 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and Arctic air creates a preservation effect that modern food processing still can't fully replicate. The smoke particles are so fine at these temperatures that they penetrate the meat completely, creating what scientists now call a bacterial inhibition zone. I tried explaining this to my local deli guy once. He just nodded and kept slicing my turkey. The timing is absolutely crucial. Traditional smoking takes anywhere from 48 to 72 hours, depending on the type and size of meat. The Inuit can tell when meat is properly smoked just by its sound when tapped. It's like having perfect pitch, but for food. Studies have shown that their traditional smoking methods reduce bacterial growth by up to 98.5%, which is better than some modern preservatives. Not bad for a technique that's older than written language. Some communities have smoking structures that have been in continuous use for over a century. The inside walls are coated with decades of smoke residue that adds to the flavor. Something health inspectors might frown at, but food scientists actually praise for its natural antimicrobial properties. It's like having a sourdough starter, except this one could probably survive a nuclear winter. The smoked meat can last up to 3 years when stored properly, though good luck keeping it around that long. The flavor is so intense that even a small piece packs more taste than an entire food court. Plus, the smoking process concentrates the nutrients so much that a quarter pound of smoked meat contains the same protein as a pound of fresh meat. Talk about portion control. But for those times when even smoke isn't enough, there's one more preservation method that might raise a few eyebrows in your local health food store. Move over kombucha because there's a new fermentation champion in town. The Inuit method makes modern probiotics look like amateur hour at a science fair. We're talking about a preservation technique that turns meat into something so packed with good bacteria, it makes yogurt look like a slacker. The process starts with a fresh catch, usually seal or whale meat, cut into specific sizes that would make any chef's precise knife skills look sloppy. The Inuit discovered centuries ago that meat chunks about the size of your thumb ferment at the perfect rate. Too big, and the center might spoil before fermenting. Too small, and it ferments so fast it could win a NASCAR race. Underground fermentation chambers are the 5-star hotels of this operation. Dug just deep enough to keep a constant temperature of about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, these chambers create the perfect environment for friendly bacteria to do their thing. Scientists recently studied these traditional chambers and found they maintain more consistent temperatures than most modern refrigerators. And they don't even need a warranty. Here's where it gets really interesting. The fermentation process creates a type of natural antifreeze. The good bacteria produce compounds that keep the meat from freezing solid even when temperatures drop below freezing. It's like having a tiny army of biochemists working 24/7 in your food. My high school science teacher would have loved explaining this. It's the perfect example of chemistry in action that doesn't involve setting anything on fire. The most mind-bending part? This fermented meat, called iguanak by some communities, is so nutrient-dense that a small portion contains more vitamin C than an orange. That's right. In a place where fresh fruit is about as common as palm trees, fermented meat helps prevent scurvy. Take that, expensive vitamin supplements. Studies have shown that traditionally fermented Arctic meat contains up to 10 times more vitamin B12 than fresh meat. It's like a multivitamin wrapped in survival food. Some families have been using the same starter culture passed down through generations for over a century. It's like a sourdough starter's tough Arctic cousin. The bacteria in these cultures have adapted so perfectly to the cold environment that scientists are studying them to understand how life might survive on other frozen planets. My attempts at making pickles seem pretty tame in comparison. Modern food scientists have only recently started understanding what the Inuit have known for thousands of years. Their fermentation process creates the perfect balance of preservation and nutrition. The final product can last up to 2 years without any refrigeration, which is longer than most people keep their New Year's resolutions. And while the strong smell might make first-timers hesitate, the preservation power of this technique has helped Arctic communities thrive in one of Earth's harshest environments. Looking at all 7 of these preservation methods together, it's clear that the Inuit didn't just survive in the Arctic, they mastered it. From snow caves to fermentation, each technique proves that sometimes the best solutions don't need plugs, batteries, or instruction manuals written in 6 languages.